My name is David Orban, and I am very glad to have all of you following the show. Before we start, I want to remind you that even if we are live, you can always watch past episodes, both on Facebook and on YouTube. On YouTube, you can also subscribe to the channel. We also have a Discord community, and I invite you to join on davidorban.com/Discord. And finally, if you find the show valuable, as well as the other content that I produce and the knowledge that I share together with my team, you're welcome to become a supporter on Patreon at patreon.com/davidorban. Today's episode is India, Tech, and the Caste System. India went through a rapid modernization in the past decades, achieving improving levels of human development and application of technology to many areas of life and business. Do the roots of Indian society, such as the caste system, have a place in modern India? How can cultures as different as those of Europe and India meet and mix and thrive? Today's guest is Kaveri Sinhji, founder of Culture Rings. Kaveri founded Culture Rings, earlier called Bluefoot, 10 years ago. It applies knowledge of Indian history in combination with psychology and social anthropology to conduct workshops and awareness sessions, especially for foreign companies or individuals trying to do business in India. It also conducts cultural immersions for Indians who are working for foreign companies to understand their parent company's culture better, as well as personalized tours, which take participants off the beaten track and beneath the skin of any place. Welcome, Kaveri.
Thank you, David.
And I can attest to the fact that those tours are just fantastic. I had the pleasure and the privilege of being on one when I met you 5 years ago in Bangalore, and it was astonishing. Maybe we can start even with that. You changed the name of your company, is now Culture Rings. Tell me what made you choose that name, which is very evocative.
So Bluefoot was, when I first created Bluefoot, I remember I didn't put too much thought into it. It was a catchy name that one of my friends had suggested because the accountant who was registering the company was on the phone saying, I need 3 names now to get permission. And India is all about permissions, right? So he was in the office where you register the company. And so she was flipping through a book and she found Bluefoot. But I realized that I was not attached to the name. And it also didn't indicate well enough the dedication that our company was going to have for the years to come on culture. So a few years ago, I just thought that I need a whole rebranding exercise, which encompasses not just some bird sitting in South America with blue feet, but it should actually bring out the meaning of the work that we do, which is we bring cultures together. We make them go around. So there's a sort of Olympic connotation to the rings, or there's a game with the rings on it. So kind of playing around that. So yeah, just toyed with it.
Wonderful. And certainly, as I said, it is a very evocative name. When I was in India for the first time, and for the moment, for the only time.
I remember that.
I started in New Delhi, then went to Goa for a few days, invited by a friend. And in New Delhi, I gave a lecture at the IIT Delhi about artificial intelligence and all those themes. And then in Bangalore, I was speaking at a conference, and almost as a happenstance, during the last day or one of the last days, someone at the conference said, "Hey, tomorrow morning we are doing this tour. Do you want to come?" And normally, I never go on tours because I never take organized vacations. Never go to resorts, and I always feel that in order to get the local flavor and the local culture, it is better to mingle and to avoid the beaten path. But then I understood that exactly what was being organized was just like that. And I want to share the photos that we took during that tour, and maybe we can comment on them both specifically, as well as taking them as the opportunity to start commenting on the themes that we want to touch upon today.
Sure.
So for me, it was very interesting that the various stops of the tour never basically included these tourist stops, right? The first one we started was a cemetery, and, and tell us a little bit, just a few sentences about the cemetery and what it represents, and why did you bring us there?
So to be honest, David, there are many factors that go into the planning. But to back up a little, I started my career in IT, but not as a technology person. I was a technical writer, and then I got into marketing and communication. This is in the mid 90s. So 1997 is when I actually picked up my first job. It was with Siemens, which is a German company. And at that time, India was just liberalizing, so we had just opened our doors to foreign investment because we were so broke as an economy that it was the only way for us to survive and, see another day. So foreign companies were now, after many years of independence, they were now allowed to come in. And Siemens, of course, came in and took a large captive center here in Bangalore. And I was among this 12-member team in Siemens Healthcare. We also had a couple of interns coming in, two Germans, in fact, Marcus and Benjamin. And I remember every Monday morning, I would notice that they were upset. Their ears were red, Germans. So, unlike us Indians with brown skin, you can't see the emotion on our skin, but with the Germans, you could. So, I was there and looking at them and understanding that it was really disappointing for them to expect a weekend to be constructive, to be able to see the culture outside of the office, to be able to shop. Anything that they wanted to do, they were misguided, or India is so complex that you couldn't just understand it on your own, and nor could you trust someone who's like a taxi driver or a stereotypical tour guide. So that's actually when I was first inspired to create a company like this one, so that you had time well spent. You know what I mean? So your extra time outside of all your conferences, if you had 3 hours, those 3 hours needed to be spent fruitfully. And that's what the tour that we designed for you was. The second factor, apart from this ambition, was the fact that Bangalore, the last thing you want to do, even less now than when you were here, is to drive around in circles. So very close to your hotel where you were staying is the Black Magic Temple in the heart of the Hindu cemetery. And what I had suggested is let's go geographically, not logically, because you normally don't start a tour with the cemetery, right? And that's how we ended up at the cemetery.
And there were a couple of things that were quite astonishing for a Western, point of view. One is that people were sleeping there, homeless people who would spend the night just on the marble slabs, and the other is something we didn't see, but you told us. I don't remember which exactly religion that would cover the dead, but leave the head out for some time, and
Exactly.
then when the spirit would finish leaving the body, that is when the head would be buried as well. So,
if there's any head left.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So you probably made sure we wouldn't see any of those, but but apparently they were there. And then we saw the temple with some amazing rituals, and then we visited. I don't remember what this was actually. If this was also
the washing village where they wash clothes for a living. So it's one of the subcastes of the service industry, of the service caste.
And you told us how for generations, since maybe the 40s, these families would live there, and they would be still washing the sheets and of the hotels nearby, that evidently find it cheaper to give to them than use washing machines or whatever cleaning services.
So this is called the Madiwala class. It's a certain clan that has for generations been washing clothes for a living. So from hotels, hospitals, or apartment buildings where not every Indian even today has a washing machine, even though it's much more now than it was before. Like when I was growing up, we didn't have a washing machine for at least the first 6 years of my life. And then we went to Iraq and we came back with a washing machine because we went shopping in Europe and Kuwait. And we were the only ones in the Air Force camp, because my father was in the Air Force. We were the only ones there who had a washing machine. And there were people who actually came to see it. And then, of course, things changed for India. But even today, even if you do have a washing machine, it makes more sense money-wise and also effort-wise to just put all your laundry in the corner, and once a week, the washerman comes, picks it up. You have a notebook in which you write how many clothes he took. When he comes back, he counts it and gives it back to you. You pay him for every piece that he washed. And in my entire growing up, I remember there was one time that my father's Air Force uniform, which is just a standard blue half-sleeved shirt, got mixed up with some other Air Force officers. And my mother was furious. It was the most irresponsible thing that a washerman can do. So she sent him back and said, "You're not coming back without my shirt." And he came back an hour later. I don't know how he figured it out, because you remember, right, in Bangalore, the lines of drying yards and the millions of clothes that they wash every day across all the washing villages. So they have a way of doing it, but it's quite amazing.
In Italy, the local language term for appliance is elettrodomestico, electric maid.
Yeah.
Right? So the domestic workers used to be helping middle-class families in Italy at the turn of the century, I would say, 120 years ago or so. And they were called maids, domestici. And then when 30, 50, 70 years later, whenever it was, appliances started to be installed in the homes, they would be called electric maids. And that is still the term that is used today. Now, how is it going with the lockdown? Is it still very strict? And then I will tell you why I'm asking the question and why now, because it has a relationship with what we were just saying. So how strict is the lockdown? How is it going?
So we have entered the third phase of the lockdown in India. So we have the first one where we were given 48 or 72 hours to do what we need to before we actually lock down. So just to prepare yourself physically, practically. And the first 2 weeks happened. I think that was from the 14th of March onwards for 2 weeks. Then they announced an extension of the same for 2 weeks. And then came the third phase, which actually started on the 4th, which is yesterday. The biggest problem that we Indians have had, and the place where we've actually broken the rules like crazy, is with the domestico, the maids, because people here can't imagine doing their own laundry. They can't imagine doing their own cooking. And oh my God, you can't imagine taking care of your own children. So
that was exactly my question, because the the depth of the families that have help, people coming on a daily basis, is very broad, right? There's a lot of. It's not just 1% of the families, and I don't know the numbers. Maybe you don't know the numbers, the percentages, but that was exactly the case. And whether it is drivers or cooks or cleaning people or tutors for the children. So what you are saying is that the rules were not respected, and these people would still come to the families.
There is so much fighting. So they tried for the first 2 weeks. And then the apartment building where I live, we noticed that in spite of the lockdown, there are about 25 maids coming in. And when the security asked them where they're going, they would say that they're going to the home of a senior citizen, somebody old. And then they would not be questioned. And then once they got in, they would work in multiple houses. So even if one of the houses they worked in might have been a senior citizen, that was just a pretext, because sometimes there was not even a senior citizen. But people were using that as an excuse and telling the maids, use it like a decoy and just come in. Our security guard had to actually go and knock on somebody's door at 9 o'clock in the night and say, we know you have a maid. You have to let her go. It's a lockdown. And the lady in the house was begging, please, just 5 more minutes. She's almost finished with the cooking. And it was really hard because it was like people were not realizing that the old are the most vulnerable. They're the ones who should not have a maid coming from any other area, right? But no logic applies.
And also from the point of view of the people who come in the homes to work, tell me if I'm wrong, but many of these people have zero savings. Even their rent or food, their own food, is bought day by day with what they earn. So if they don't earn anything, they have no way to bridge over until after the lockdown is lifted, and they may go hungry, or they could be kicked out of the place they sleep, right?
Millions of people were not accounted for. When the lockdown was called, there was no arrangement made by the government of India for the repatriation of people from small towns where there are no job opportunities who come into the city to work. It could be, working on the construction jobs or roads. Mostly these are called daily wage labor. So they're paid for every day that they work. And there are millions of such people who come to the city because they are assured that even if half of what they were promised happens, it's better than being in the village where there is no job opportunity. But when the lockdown happened, there was no arrangement made to transport these people back. Many of them had to walk 4 or 500 kilometers with holding their little children, babies, in their arms, camping overnight, knocking at doors in towns through, hoping that somebody will be kind and give them food. No arrangement was made. It was very sad, and that was the image that was actually in all the media across. If you saw the news channels about India during the lockdown, that was where the attention came, and it was good because now the government has stepped up and compensated them. But it came to a place where people felt that they would die of hunger and not COVID. Hunger would kill them first. So they were not worried about COVID-19. They were worried about where their next meal will come from. And these are people, so the poverty line of India, David? Can you guess?
No, please. I mean, I am often looking at sources like Our World in Data that has wonderful collections from reliable sources of information around a lot of variables in our world. And I'm sure I will be looking it up while you are speaking, but please go ahead, and then we can comment the data we are seeing.
So can you, just without looking it up, can you guess what do you think is the poverty figure? How much do I have to earn to consider myself not in the poverty zone anymore? How much do you think I should earn?
Okay.
You can say it in euros or
Yeah, or dollars. Sure. So let me take a wild guess, right? So on a worldwide basis, between 1.5 and $2 a day is considered extreme poverty. So that would be $60 a month. So in India, in order not to be considered poor, I think it would be $200 a month.
okay, that comes to per day.
No. Oh, sorry. You want per day? I would
Yeah,
say between, okay, in order not to be considered poor, like $6, $7 a month.
$6, $7 a month,
No, sorry, a day.
a day, a day. Okay.
A day.
So let me tell you the reality. The
Yes.
reality is it's 40 cents.
And you are not considered poor by the government?
Yeah. So Indian 32 rupees a day, if you earn, you are not considered poor, which means you are not taken care of by the government.
That's right. That's right.
So you're
Yeah,
not entitled
those
to ration.
definitions matter. Those
Yeah.
definitions have very, very concrete consequences. Absolutely.
Yeah. So as a result, like the nanny who works for my daughter, she has not declared her income. So she doesn't tell anyone how much she earns. She doesn't pay taxes, because if she does, even though she earns much more than 32 rupees a day, so she earns what is considered a pretty decent salary. It's not super good, which is what the expats pay here, but by Indian standards, I pay her 15,000 Indian rupees per month, which comes to about 500 rupees a day, right? And that's probably like $10 or maybe less, maybe $8 a day is what I pay her. But even that, if she shows it to the government, she will be considered not poor. And then she cannot get free schooling, healthcare, housing, and ration, food, free food. Because you have to show that you earn less than 32 rupees, only then you get that.
And are there people who are actually earners to that level? So are people who are documenting that they are earning 20 per day rather than 32? Because it sounds so close to zero that it's
Yeah.
difficult to do anything and to be paid less than that.
So when you're earning that little, David, you're not capable of documentation.
That's right.
If you were capable of documentation, you would be doing way more.
Mm.
So these are people like even my nanny. She has studied a little, maybe till eighth grade, but she can't read anything. She can't write anything. She can figure out the alphabet of her local language, which I can't read because it's from a village. So there's so many languages in India as well, right? But it's very interesting how this has kind of snowballed from 3,000 years ago. This sort of discrimination that you can call India and have a conversation with me about things like the poverty line, anthropology, and history and politics. But you can call somebody else who might be standing right next to me and get none of this from them. Because the polarity, the disparity between them and someone like me is so big, and no one has made enough of an effort to bridge it. You know?
So there are uh, cultural and religious roots to
Mm-hmm.
the discrimination and the caste system, and we want to talk about that too. But
That's why we're here.
the one of the a nation has
Mm-hmm.
some basic duties,
Yeah,
health and security and
yeah,
education. And
yeah.
one of the best ways to bridge a basic source of discrimination to stop opportunities to be gained by those who are less privileged is to
Mm-hmm.
give them a solid education.
Mm-hmm.
And do you believe that India is not able to provide that today still?
So it's a tough question, David, because I think, and I think a lot of people like me think, India is more than capable of providing quality education. The amount of money that goes into the pockets of the corrupt can change the country 5 times over. You know, unfortunately, the first cabinet of India, which was headed by a very idealistic man called Jawaharlal Nehru, who went on to become our prime minister, he set the foundation for India's political philosophy, which was called the license Raj, where every person has the ability to give you permission to do what you want to do. So he can say yes or no. So you want to start a business with steel, you go to the politician and he will sign the document saying yes or no. And the government's philosophy was for itself to stay poor. But the point was that Nehru himself was a rich man, so he had no greed for money. After him came many politicians who were not as rich as him, and they saw that by their signature, so much wealth is being created in the lives of other people, not themselves. And they started to think, what's in it for me? So the next time someone came to me for a signature, I would figure out that the potential of this is 1 million USD. So I would ask them under the table for 10% of that. So this started to happen, corruption, monopoly, all of this. And that corruption has actually stagnated India's ability to equalize. You know, whatever support we could have given to the poor, instead we poured money down the pockets of politicians because we have such a short-sighted way of dealing with things. I just want what I need right now. You know, the same money could actually go to change the life of a whole village. But no, I'm going to use that money to pay a bribe. Because
India is a federal system.
Mhm.
Could a state change and say, okay, I will pay public servants market wages so that the incentive is not there anymore, or they are prohibited from doing that?
No, but they have increased the amount of pay that public servants get. But you can't compare it to the number of zeros behind the corrupt money. You cannot match that. There was a story of a plot of land which somebody wanted to construct an airport on, and to get permission to get that contract for the airport and to be given that contract by the government. He went to the minister of a certain state of infrastructure. I couldn't even count the number of zeros. There were about 6 or 7 zeros after the main figure, which was 17. And that was how much money he was going to get paid just for his signature. And I'm talking about a few years ago. This is not a long time ago. So it continues to happen. But I should probably go back a little bit in history because that's one of my pet subjects.
Yes, please. And let's talk about the caste system, which
System.
supposedly was eliminated many decades ago, but it still survives.
It was eliminated. Yeah. If you ask somebody on the street in India or in your office, they will talk proudly about the elimination of the caste system. But then you turn around and ask them what caste are they from, and they will tell you straight away. Everyone is so aware of it because it is alive and kicking. The caste system it has been abolished since 1948. It's been abolished in 1952. A whole doctrine was written about how people of those castes should be rehabilitated to equalize into society. But it's all paper. The reality is very different. But I should go back 3,000 years where, the Indus Valley people, the animist civilization that first inhabited the Indian subcontinent towards, you've been to Delhi. So a little west of Delhi is where their settlement was. The ruins are still there. And a large part of those ruins are also in Pakistan. Those people were settlers of the original type in India. They used to be traders and agriculturists. Then there was a flood, and those people were pushed down towards the south side of India. And because of the flood and earthquake, there was also a lot of arrival from Central Asia, and Europe. So the way we look, you might have noticed, David, when you meet your Indian friends, and I know you have many fans in India. So you might have noticed how different we all look from each other, right? So you have the very almost African looking people, and then you also have a very aboriginal kind of face, and then you have a very Chinese looking face. You have people like me who look a little more towards the maybe Middle Eastern. Um, of course, by looking at each other, you can gauge where the person might have come from. But there's another thing that you can actually gauge. You can gauge what caste they might be from. You might not always be right, but people spend a lot of energy gauging caste. The caste system as such did not exist, but after the flood and after the arrival of people from so many different lands, bringing so many different physical faculties and mental talents and linear talents, there was an idealized human calling for segregation. So they created three categories. One is people with big heads. So if you have a big head, it's likely that, yeah, that's a great slide you pulled up. So you type Indians and that's what you get, huh?
I actually typed Indian faces.
Amazing. You can see that, I mean, within the first 8 images, you can already see the diversity, right? So the original segregation of India was an idealistic calling. It was idealized where, for example, if you have a big head, it's likely that you have a big brain. And if your brain is big, it's likely that you have a lot of knowledge. Well, we've learned much later that it's not necessarily true that a big head means you're smarter. But that was how they decided that this person with a big head above a certain circumference would become a Brahmin. A Brahmin is a person of learning and a person who can teach and somebody who belongs to the priestly class. People who can perform ceremonies, um, who are advisors to kings. The second is people with big, strong muscle mass, big bones, big muscle structure, tall people. So those became the protectors. They became the warriors. They were the ones on the front line. And some of them who were very valiant also become leaders, kings. They were advised by the wise Brahmins because they were not necessarily wise themselves, but they were very strong. And like in all societies, including Julius Caesar's, your capability as a king was measured by how good a general you can be. So the warriors also became the rulers. The third was the people of business, and those were called the Vaishyas. So they were the suppliers of stuff. So whether it was oil or grain, they kept the economy and the people alive. Until the 9th century, this was the segregation. There was no untouchability. There were no lower caste people. In fact, very often you would find people fluidly moving from being a teacher to being a warrior or being a businessman, depending on what you were good at. It didn't always depend even on your physical. But
Yeah,
in the ninth,
I would remark that whatever a parent looks like only is weakly connected to whatever the descendants will look like. So a very rigid classification is not stable, not only in body type but also inclinations and talent. So I would expect that kind of freer movement between occupations to bubble up, even if the initial thinking is to classify everybody once and for all.
so everything that starts, such stuff that sticks on normally has a very beautiful beginning. The idea is something nice that's going to revolutionize the way we live or operate in a good way. And then later, the corruption comes. And I'm not talking about just monetary corruption like we're suffering now, but a system gets corrupted. So, for example, in the 9th century, we started to write things down, so that's when a lot of our epics, which are very famous and beautiful stories that I very often tell children who come on our tours were documented. But slowly, this system, which was horizontal and fluid, started to become vertical. And very soon, the people with the big heads, the Brahmins, who now were giving birth to children with small heads, started to feel that I want to protect my kind and I want to make sure that they follow the same path as I did because I'm privileged. So they started to write this down, and anonymously, somewhere between 1250 BC and 1000 BC, magically a book came out called the Manusmriti. So if you want to type, it's called Manusmriti, Manusmriti. I will send you the links for that. But that book documents the way we're supposed to live in India. It was almost the first law book, and later when the British came, they actually used that book to create Hindu law. And in that book came punishments for people who break social harmony. So whether you're a teacher or a warrior or a businessman, if you become a bad person, or you break the law, you have adultery, or you rob, or you put somebody out of power, you kill someone, you become an outcast. That's when a new caste outside of the caste system was created. You can see Manusmriti there, right? So that's amazing. Please keep that and maybe share this with your audience today, because this really gives you a lot of answers, not just to the caste system, but the status of women in India. Not just caste-based discrimination, sex-based. Why do women put themselves down? Why do we allow men to put us down in India? So that's a whole other discussion. But as far as the castes go, we have a very clear directive that if a person commits a crime, he becomes an outcast. And there's a certain treatment that outcasts deserve. They do not deserve to ever be included back into society. They should not drink water or eat food from the same source as people of belonging to the caste system. This is when there were two types of outcasts that were created. One was the ones who would be in service and the creation of the service industry. So I might have been a teacher who committed a crime. I stole a book because I really wanted it, and I was an outcast. I might be taken back into the society because my crime was not so grave. I would become an apprentice to a teacher, but I would never become a teacher. So I would be a serviceman. Or if I'm from the business class and I was working for somebody selling oil, and I accidentally spilled the oil one day, very irresponsible. And for my punishment, he sent me out of the caste. He might take me back, but I would only be an apprentice. I would never be able to inherit the profession again. This is how the service caste.
I have 1,000 questions, but let's start with 4.
Mm-hmm.
So the opportunity for the Brahmin to create this system using the pretext of the sacred book was, of course, too juicy to resist. And then the irredeemability of the punishment, for example, or the being cast out became inheritable. So the descendants would belong to the untouchables, for example, as well, correct?
Yes, absolutely. So the untouchables had not yet been created. The untouchables come later. This is outcast. Down from 3 castes that existed, you create a 4th caste, which became the service industry.
Okay.
And then in those times, people with special needs, whether it's mental or physical, somebody who's maybe slow, or somebody who's physically not according to our normal, those people became considered possibly contagious. Like in the time of COVID-19, right? When you think someone might be contagious, you don't want them to come and eat in your house, touch your stuff, drink your water. You want them as far away. So in those days, before the IT revolution, 2,000 years before, they obviously created a whole strategy to keep them away, but to keep them alive. So you had a separate well, a separate side of the highway where they would be situated, you know. So that was the birth of the untouchability. And those people were not allowed to marry anyone from within. No one was allowed to touch them. They were only allowed to do menial jobs that no one else was prepared to do, which is like cleaning the drains. And even today, that continues. It's enormous how many people are, called the Harijans. When I went on a holiday 2 years ago to a little village in Gujarat, I woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning to the chatter of children. When I looked out, all the children were picking up feces of animals and humans from the side of the road. I was staying at the end of the village. So I went out to take some photographs and I asked them, why are you children up so early and why are you picking up so much of, cow dung? And so one of them looks at me and says, because I'm a Harijan. And she smiled. Harijan is the fancy word given to untouchables by Mahatma Gandhi. Harijan means people of God, people blessed by God. So then after the Manusmriti was written, it became, like you said, inherited. So and what they said is this way they will perfect their service. Also, what happened was during this time, craft and art started to become very popular, and India started to export a lot of art and craft. So during this time, more and more people were punished and abolished from their caste and put into the craft industry. That's how the lower caste people grew. Now I have a few pieces of Lego which I stole from my daughter because I thought that would illustrate how we are divided in India. So maybe I start with religion, right? So look at this. This is the Hindus. Okay, that's more than no. This is the Hindus. Yes. Somebody took away my Lego. That's the Hindus. That's the Muslims. And these are the Christians. And these are the others, which would include Buddhism, Jainism, Judaism, so all of these. So that's how religiously we are divided. And the criticism is that Hindus are the ones keeping the caste system alive, even though all the other religions also have versions within themselves of the caste system. So when the caste system was being questioned by B.R. Ambedkar, the man who actually wrote the fresh new constitution of India, including the people of lower caste to come in and vote and be a part of politics and all of that. When he came in and questioned, he told everyone, you have to leave Hinduism to escape from the caste system. Even the British, when they came, they said, if you want to escape, you convert to Christianity. But of course, it's so deep that you actually carry your caste with you. Even today, when I open the newspaper and look, there is a section called the matrimonial advertisements where I can advertise that I'm available to marry, but I have to choose where I should put my name. It's not enough to just say that I'm a Hindu or a Christian. I also have to say that I'm a Kshatriya, which is the warrior. In Kshatriya, there are another bunch of castes. So which one exactly am I? There are 3,000 subcastes.
And it is not prohibited for the papers to advertise based on that.
No, absolutely not.
Because what you would think is that once you abolish the caste system, you also put in place the mechanisms by which it would not be perpetuated, and just like it is prohibited, for example, in America, to put a job offer and advertise for a job offer and say only whites can apply. Yeah, actually, it is prohibited even to advertise only male or female can apply, or there are many, or only people under 40 can apply, right? All of these are prohibited even in the land of the free, where everything is free, because so the society decided that it was better to curb the freedom to discriminate, so that discrimination could be lowered, than not allowing discrimination to flourish. And
Yeah.
the newspapers are perpetuating the caste system by being permitted to accept advertising for uh, searching life partners for wedding that is exactly based on the caste system, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it would be one way. I mean, it would be a really good way, but I don't think the societies would permit it. They would come up with ways for it to continue to live outside of the newspaper. Like there are websites like shadi.com, which
No,
means marriage.com. You
let,
know,
let me confirm that for sure I wouldn't be coming up with the perfect solution on our humble conversation here for a 3,000-year-old issue in India. However, what you just said is the perfect excuse for doing nothing.
Absolutely. I agree. Absolutely. And that's probably the excuse being used by our government. If I can throw it at you, they can also throw it at everyone. So that's what they do. But I mean, if
Now,
you
is it true? Like I read and just Googled that an untouchable from the Dalit caste became president in India.
yes, he did. So there is, of course, instances of that. And in the government sector as well as private practices. I was having a conversation with my cousin Man just before you called, and I was telling him about our show. And he was saying that, Jija, which is elder sister, don't forget to mention to David that even though the representation among leadership in the world of, say, the top 100 companies, private companies in India, the lower caste people don't have much representation there. They have plenty of representation in the government. They like government jobs because they come from a service background. They're most comfortable in service. And very few of them actually rise out to shine, at least right now in India, in the world of technology and innovation. So I actually was looking at Forbes magazine, where there's a very interesting article. I've sent you the link as well, where they studied the top 100 private companies in India, which were a mix of technology and pharmaceutical and all of that. Another piece of Lego. So that is the upper caste people of upper caste in the leadership versus 4%, which are from the lower caste. But if you look at the breakup, we are 28% lower caste people. So it doesn't make sense to have only 4% of our leaders to be represented in
Well,
private companies.
actually, it would make sense to be 0% lower caste because they shouldn't be allowed. So 4% is wonderful.
It is, but I think a part of the problem is also the education system. When the British came in, they counted how many schools we have running, and they sent back a report to the Queen of England saying there's hardly any school in India. But the way they counted the schools being taught English or not.
Mm-hmm.
It could be a 500 people class school being taught with specialists in all the sciences and arts, but being taught in a local language. That does not count as a school. But if you have 5 students and somebody's teaching you 2 subjects in English, that's a school. So their disregard for the Indian languages and the measuring of people's worth, academic and professional worth, by the presence of English in their instinctive response language, that became the measure also today of employability. So I might go do a
Well, should
PhD.
should India abandon English and embrace Hindi? That wouldn't solve the problem either, because there are
No,
hundreds of millions of people who don't speak Hindi either.
absolutely. But look at Spain and look at France. I mean, how many people in Spain are unsuccessful because they don't speak English? In India, it's an employability thing, right? So if I want to go and get a job in an IT company, it's impossible for me to do it if I don't speak English. And most of the schools, which are free, to which people of the lower castes are being sent, do not teach English. So how do they become employable?
Sorry. Okay.
Mhm.
So, is English a national language in India?
Uh, it's
An
not. We don't
official
have a
language?
national language. Hindi was nominated as the national language, but it was rejected. Hindi. It was rejected by the people. So we don't actually have a national language.
Well, according to official language, okay. Well, let's not get lost into those details.
So what did it say? I'm
But
curious.
it's interesting. So you said that there are plenty of schools that do not teach in English,
Yeah.
and
Or they don't.
then they can teach in Hindi or in one of the local languages that are spoken by tens of millions of people, and Maharashtra or whatever else.
Mhm.
Um, okay, that is of obviously another source of
Disparity.
social inequality that is generated
Mhm.
over and over across generations. We we definitely will have to come back
Mhm.
for maybe not one but more episodes if you are available, because we have so many things, and I'm so curious. When I came to India, or before coming to India, um, talking about the various trips, because I used to travel. I don't know when I will start traveling again or if ever, but I used to travel a lot. And I traveled in many places. And India was one of the places that I for whatever reason didn't have the chance of traveling to. And I remember I would always say, yeah, one of the reasons I'm not going to India is because I don't know if I would come back. I
Oh,
felt, and I still absolutely feel that India is a place where I could just get completely lost, let myself be absorbed by the place, completely losing my identity and becoming whatever.
the yogi.
And and maybe I will do that in some number of years. I don't know, but but
But David,
it
I mean, apart from corporate and government, there's just one thought I want to leave you with. There's also discrimination that happens in our everyday lives. There was a survey also done about how many people will actually be comfortable with somebody of a lower caste touching things in their kitchen, like plates, and it's almost alarming that something like 52% people of upper caste are not comfortable with someone with a lower caste coming in. And the same thing happened in IT, where a company that I consult for, cross culture consulting, somebody got promoted and two people resigned because they couldn't imagine reporting to someone from a lower caste. And I'm
wow.
talking about happening now. So these are just two stories, and I have hundreds of such stories. I'm very happy to interact with your viewers or have another episode to share more, because I think we only touched the surface today.
Absolutely, and I will just flash a couple of things on the screen to provoke, without even leaving you the opportunity to respond, so that both of us remain thirsty and eager to cover the issue next time.
Sure.
One of them, or actually three. Um, One of them is that the issue of the role of women in society. And this is a photo that I took in Bangalore that says, "She's a child, just a young girl. Don't rob her innocence." It's a campaign by the Bangalore City Police, and the fact that this campaign is needed is already a sign, right?
Mhm.
Another is how in the Times of India, there is an article saying that measuring the watt, how many kilowatts are deployed in Indian agriculture, the share of machines versus humans is 90%. So if we measure automation of a given sector, not in terms of number of robots versus number of people, but actually how much energy is from one side or the other, Indian agriculture and probably every other place in the world as well is almost completely machine-based already. And then the last provocation is how the predominance of the Hindu religion is now being exploited politically, and what does this mean both for minorities as well as for the social harmony that a society as rich and as composite as India needs, regardless of the short-term political gains that could be achieved by pushing populism and pushing nationalism. So, as I said, these are important and rather deep subjects and just starting points for us to meet again and talk about them. This has been wonderful having you on Searching for the Question live, Kaveri, and thank you very much for sharing your knowledge and your empathy and your ability to communicate across cultures today. It was wonderful to have you.
Thank you very much. Namaste. And questions are welcome. I can answer them offline.
Okay, thank you. So thanks for joining us today at Searching for the Question Live. If you speak Italian, I invite you to join and subscribe also my Italian language YouTube channel on davidorban.com/YouTube Italiano. And I want also to thank our supporters on Patreon who help me and my team produce this kind of content. If you want to become a supporter, please go to patreon.com/davidorban. See you at the next episode of Searching for the Question Live.